So welcome to another Blucher battle report. This is the Battle of Alkmaar in 1799. A very unusual battle because it has the British and the Russians as allied fighting against the French and the Dutch after the British allied force invaded the Netherlands in order to drive the Netherlands out of the war. Here is the map. It comes from the excellent Blucher hex scenarios, with the link is in the description. So the battle takes place close to the sea. On the right, you see the sea on the edge of the board. The yellow is then a large section of dunes, which is difficult terrain in the Blucher books. The other main feature is the canal, the dike that is running from the top left down to the center at the bottom. That is impassable except at the bridges, so it really separates the battle into two separate areas. The victory points, there are four. There is the town of Bergen up in the center right. There is the victory point over in the dunes right on the far right. The other two victory points, there is the village of Skuldam, which is in the center down in the bottom, and the final victory point is over at Koldik on the other side of the dike. In addition, there are a large number of flooded fields since the French and Dutch have opened the sluice gates in order to flood the terrain. You'll see those marked on the map as the lines in the middle of the open terrain. There are also some woods over by the dunes. So the British set up at the bottom. The Anglo-Russians are attacking towards the French and Dutch at the top. The town of Alkmaar is just off the map to the top left. The Anglo-Russians are against the clock. They need to capture 3 out of those 4 victory points by the end of the game. Of course, the sides can also break the other enemy army, but the French and Dutch will only break if 2 of the victory points have also been taken. The Anglo-Russians have by far the strongest army, but they have to attack and are short of pips and have to trudge through a lot of difficult terrain on this map. Let's look at the two armies. Let's look at the French-Dutch defending force first. So there are 2 Dutch divisions and 1 French division. Blucher has quite a flexible figure scale, and in this case the units are about half scale compared to the normal Blucher game. So you've got 5 or 6 units in a division, whereas normally you would only have 2 or 3. On the far side of the canal, the Dindals division, the 1st Batavian division, you can see 4 infantry units. In the center, there is Dumonceau with the 2nd Dutch division. Got a very strong grenadier unit, and then 6 line infantry, all with skirmish firepower, which gives them the longer range advantage, and 1 shock cavalry, dragoons. At the bottom, you've got the Vandamme division, which is the French division. You've got 7 French line units there, all with the skirmish capability. And you have got 1 French dragoon unit and an artillery unit. So the French have a balanced army with a couple of cavalry and a lot of infantry with skirmish firepower. If they can keep the fight at skirmish range, then they will do very well. The British army is much stronger. You can see the Abercrombie right column, very strong with 2 British Guards units and 5 British infantry units, 2 light cavalry, and a mobile horse artillery. All the British infantry are steady. The Guards have shock, and all the British infantry have firepower. At this stage of the Napoleonic Wars, the British infantry were not well trained in skirmisher and light infantry tactics, so none of the British infantry, except for the 1 light unit, have the skirmish advantage. So the British will be very strong when they get to volley range to use their firepower bonus, but will be at a disadvantage if they fight the French at long range. The second column, the right center column, is the Russian corps. It has 4 grenadier units, which have the shock capability, makes them good in close combat, and they're also got steady, which makes them good on close combat in defense. 4 line units with the steady command, 1 light cavalry, and a Cossack unit. So the Russians are very standard, good on defense, and the Grenadiers will be good on taking and charging the French. Finally, the left center column and the left column, they have got 5 British units in the left center column, all with steady and firepower, and 1 of them Guards. And finally, Pulteney over on the left column, 4 British line units and 1 Russian line unit. So overall, the Allies have got 29 units, and that means that they will break if they lose 10. The French have got 21 units, which means they will break if they lose 7. So 7 is the break point for the French and 10 for the Anglo-Dutch. So just to go back to the deployment, the French division will be set up from Bergen to the sea. The big Dutch division will be spread between Koendijk and Schuldam behind the flooded dikes, and Dindals will be over on the French right flank. For the British, Abercrombie is set up in and behind the dunes. The French are in the Russians are in the center opposite Bergen. Dundas is split, some units on either side of the dike, and Pulteney over on the extreme left flank of the Anglo-Dutch. This is Peter visiting from Thailand. He is taking the role of the French and Dutch commander for this game. You'll see the French have got some emplacements. 1 has been placed next to Bergen town, and 2 entrenchments placed over on the left flank. The French have been set up, Vandamme's corps spreading, defending the full range from Bergen over to the dunes, with the Dutch set up in a tighter formation, with 1 unit garrisoning the advanced town. Here you see the British deployment. Abercrombie's corps deployed behind and on the edge of the dunes, and then the Russians in the center. You can see the flooded fields, which are going to be rough terrain in the center, although they don't block visibility. The woods on the right block visibility. The dunes do count as difficult terrain, and but don't block line of sight. View from the British left flank, you can see Pulteney's division ready to advance next to the flooded fields and engage the French in their entrenchments. The British have the first move and advance their central corps as fast as they can. They want to get, their plan is to get the British firepower into action as fast as possible. So they advance on both sides of the canal with their British corps. They're lucky enough to be able to move another corps as well, and this is used to get Abercrombie into action. The British plan is to use all their initial pips to get the British into a firing line and grinding down the French. Once the British are in place, then they can use the freed up pips to move the Russians for the close combat killing blow against a weakened French force. So this is the view at the end of the first Anglo-Dutch turn. The Abercrombie has moved a little in the dunes, but they are prioritizing getting the cavalry and the horse artillery into action. And the central division has moved up on both sides of the dike. The French start off in a strong defensive position, so don't need to move very much. They shuffle their figures, they extend their defensive line to the right of Bergen town, and one of their brigades enters the dikes in order to protect the flank of the firing line in the middle. Anglo-Dutch turn 3, and the British are not wasting any time in the center. They advance the Guard Corps right into the teeth of the French defensive line. They are ignoring the garrison in the town. They have sufficient forces outside that they are risking the garrison charging their unit in the flank, because then it would have to come out of garrison and would be vulnerable to the following up units. Over the other side of the dike, you'll see the British being careful to stay out of skirmish range of the French. French are particularly strong at skirmish range. The British want to stay beyond skirmish range and then in one move to volley range. And here you'll see the same British pattern. They are using their first move to move the small corps with 5 units, hoping that their 3 pip dice will enable them to do another corps move. And then when they get that move, they move the entire Abercrombie corps with 9 units, ending their turn. So they're able to get 2 British divisions mobilized almost unless they roll under a 5 on their pip dice. Here you see 2 French brigades opening up on the British Guards and inflicting a hit. Note they also have got 2 units in reserve. They're Dutch Dragoons and 1 reserve brigade ready to go either side of the dike wherever needs reinforcements. Anglo-Dutch turn 5, and Abercrombie's units steam forwards. You have the cavalry and the horse artillery leading the way. The cavalry will force some of the French infantry to go into prepared, and the horse artillery is firing canister on the French infantry. The infantry moves up as fast as it can. The ones that are in good terrain moving 2 base widths. The ones that are struggling through the dunes only move 1 base width. The British are not wasting any time, and 2 of their brigades move up to engage the French at volley range around the village of Kojik. That village does not count as a garrison. It counts as difficult terrain. The buildings are not substantial enough to provide cover. The British engage in volley fire with the two units that didn't move, the guards, and also with the horse artillery, since they have the mobile trait. They inflict one hit each on the brigades opposite. The guards are very happy that they managed to get to volley range, only suffering one hit, and now have the advantage over the French at close range. The following brigade moved through them to engage another French unit at close range. In the French turn, they are able to shoot across almost their entire line, with the British taking multiple hits, several units taking two hits, and all units taking some damage. There was no real way to avoid this. If the Brits uh, delay, then they will run out of time to take the victory hexes, and they have to get to close range in order to use their advantage. So this attrition is inevitable, and they hope that their superior volley firepower will enable them to win out. On the left of the dike, the British are now in position to engage in volley firefight, so they don't need to use any pips and start inflicting some hits on the French. Likewise, on the other side, the British are fighting, shooting, and inflicting hits on the French units. The cavalry advance and are threatening the infantry in the dike. The horse artillery move on and are engaging the French, who are in a prepared position, so more vulnerable to artillery. They risk being charged by the French cavalry, but they consider that acceptable since they have used their strongest shooting, and that would put the French cavalry in a vulnerable position. The British are now getting close to skirmish range, staying just beyond it, but next turn the British will be able to reach volley range of the French. They are coming in as individual units rather than a long line, but that is what you have to do in order to get there as fast as possible. So the British are prioritizing speed rather than minimizing casualties. And here you see the Russians still haven't moved. All of the MOs of the Anglo-Dutch force have been used to get the British into firing positions. The Russians can be moved once the British are engaged. The French shoot across the line. They are inflicting a lot of attrition on the British infantry. However, they roll quite low on their MO dice and are not able to do all the moves they want. The British cavalry and the guards charge in on the French brigade that is in the flooded fields. That two units against one, and so they have got overwhelming dice, but the French roll particularly low, and the French unit gets eliminated, taking 5 hits from that melee. The British advance into the space. So here you see the guards have broken through. They have advanced into the position of the French brigade that was eliminated and are now in a great position to roll up the flank of the French line. Breakthrough for the British. First blood to the British, 1 unit eliminated. Another of the French units had suffered in fire, so gets pulled out of the line, with the dragoons going in to threaten the British infantry. The French fire near the dike is particularly successful. You can see that Dundas's force are down to 2 or 3 strength each, as a result of the French shooting. The French dragoons move into the flooded fields to hold the center, and Vandamme brings some of his brigades that were defending in the dunes over to support the defense of Bergen. The firing of the French forces the British horse artillery to retire, but because it only inflicts one hit, they can turn around and get straight back into the fight. The British have used their MO dice to bring the far left division into firing range of the French, move them up to support Dundas's division in the attack on the left of the dike. A big turn for the British. Their forces push the advantage that they have. 2 units charge in on to the French brigade holding the edge of the line, the light cavalry and the damage guards. The guards who broke the French unit last turn continue their charge into the unit that retreated from the main line, and the British cavalry keep the French dragoons busy in the flooded fields. The British infantry on the other side of the dike are now in position and open fire across the board, inflicting attrition onto the French defenders. The British get lucky with their shooting, inflicting 3 hits onto the brigade next to Bergen, destroying it with 1 shot. Of the 3 charges, the British Hussars gets bounced by the French dragoons and retreat backwards. The guards successfully manage to hit the French brigade in the flank and destroy another unit. For the final attack, the 2 units attacking the Dutch Grenadiers, they manage to win, but don't inflict enough hits to destroy the unit. It retreats back to the other side of the British. So here's the position at the end of the turn. You'll see the British breakthrough, the French in retreat. However, if you look in the foreground, you'll see that the British infantry has suffered a lot of attrition in this fight and are looking vulnerable. But the French have now lost 3 divisions from the center. The French cavalry counterattacks. The French dragoons charged the exposed British horse artillery. The Dutch dragoons charged the weakened British infantry brigade in front of them. On the French right flank, their infantry has put up a great defense. You can see the attrition on the British brigades down to 1, 1, and 2 strength, respectively. The British have not had the MO to pull them out of the line. They've been too busy pushing the attack in other sectors, and now that whole division is vulnerable to being destroyed. Both of the French charges are successful, and both of the British units are destroyed, the horse artillery and the infantry brigade. So the score is now 3 French units eliminated to 2 British units. The British attack has rather stalled out, with the infantry squaring up to fresh French reserves, and the other units now suffering too many casualties to go forwards. The British are now in a close range firefight near the city of Bergen. The British managed to get in, luckily, without taking any casualties, but because of the French entrenchments, they are fighting on about equal with the French, even though they have the close range firepower advantage. With the British strength in the center now spent, the Russians swing into action, with the whole corps lumbering forwards in the center. Off camera, the Dutch dragoons charge again, wiping out a second British infantry brigade in the center. Then they pull back in the face of the advancing Russian cavalry. The French cavalry has effectively held up the Russians, and they are deploying slowly in the center. The French skirmishers from across the dike pick off the British brigade in reserve and destroy it with their cumulative firepower over the last 4 turns. That brings the British total to 4 units destroyed, compared to only 3 for the French. On the British left flank, the attrition is finally grinding the French down, and the Russian infantry charge in and destroy 1 brigade of French. 2 other French brigades are looking very weak, even though they have inflicted huge damage on the British. So on the other side, the Russian Uhlans charge the French dragoons, but only succeed in pushing them back with casualties even. Around Bergen, the British brigade that slogged through the dunes finally reaches the edge of the wood and charges the French battery, which has been firing at the whole time, so was reduced strength. It eliminates it and advances into the gap. With that elimination, the total score swings back. The British have now lost 4 units and the French have lost 5. However, the French do have a lower break point of 7 compared to the Anglo-Russian forces of 10. However, the French also need to lose 2 victory points in order to lose, and at the moment they are holding all 4. The Russian Uhlans have pushed the Dutch dragoons back, and that has cleared the room for the Russians to deploy. 2 grenadier brigades line up to charge the city next turn, while the rest of the Russians press forward through the flooded fields. 2 of the French brigades that had defended their right flank so heroically are brought to 0 strength and eliminated. This opens up the village with no defenders, and since the other French can only cross at the bridge, there is no way they can stop the Anglo-Russians from taking that next turn. However, you can see the enormous damage that they have inflicted, with 3 British units on only 1 strength point left. The French defense regroups with only 2 strong units and the dragoons to cover their line. French firepower destroys another British unit, the one that had broken through and inflicted the decisive charges, but was then left stranded in French lines, and reduces another unit near Bergen to only 1 strength point. So the British have now suffered 6 units destroyed, and they also have 4 units on only 1 strength point left. So they will break if they reach 10 units broken. 2 important moves in this turn. The Russian brigade captures the village the other side of the dike, taking that victory point. The 2 Russian grenadier brigades charged the garrison in the village of Skuldam. That is a tough fight because the French brigade in there is undamaged. They are a strength of 6 plus 2 for their garrison, so rolling 8 dice. Both Russian units have shock, so would normally be on 7s, but are reduced to a 6 because they are charging into difficult. So it is 8 dice against 12 dice for the Russians, not a certain thing, but in favor of the Russians. The Russian grenadiers win, capturing the village of Skuldam and pushing the French out. Because the French were already at their break point of 7 units destroyed, and that is the second victory point that the Anglo-Russians have taken. That breaks the entire French army, bringing things to a close. They inflicted 6 hits, units eliminated on the British, and there were another 4 units at only 1 strength point. So they came very close to breaking the Anglo-Russian army. Even though the Russians did almost none of the fighting, they managed to get the glory, capturing both of the key victory points. The French army would withdraw off the field to the south and tried to establish a new defensive line closer to Alkmaar. So the debrief, it was a close-run thing, with the French inflicting huge casualties on the British and coming close to breaking the British. The British were attacked very aggressively right from the start, and also got quite lucky with their MO dice, so they were always able to move one of their small corps and their big corps without losing any turns. They pushed very aggressively into firing positions and took a lot of casualties doing that, but it did keep the tempo up, and once they got to volley range, they were able to win the attrition battle with the French, except on their left flank, where the French outshot them. The breakthrough came in the center when there was always a gap in the French defensive line, and the British took full advantage of that, charging through the dikes and managing to kill 3 French brigades quite early in the battle, which really turned the tide. After that, it was far more even, with the British taking huge casualties on their attritioned units. But they had the numbers to be able to withstand that. And when the Russians came up, the French were left with not many options. Great little scenario. It's quite tricky to manage your MOs as the Anglo-Russian player, and the French can put up a sterling defense. Perhaps it could have retreated a little more, maybe giving up one of the victory points in order to make it harder for the Anglo-Russian player to get to contact and prolong the fight. But well played by the French, and the Anglo-Russian plan finally worked. So I hope you enjoyed this. Look forward to seeing you again on our next Blucher refight.